Welcome everyone to United Helpers' first webinar, brought to you by the Society of the United Helpers. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. The title of our presentation today, as you can see, is You Mean I Can Be a Hero Too? Surprising Giving Possibilities Inspired by a Pandemic. I'm Krista Carroll. I'm UH's Vice President of Development, and I'm your host. The date today, just for reference, is May 20th, 2020, if you're watching a recording of this. Among our attendees today are some of my colleagues, board members, family members, and more. Thank you everybody for being with us. We are here to help you learn more about supporting the wonderful work of United Helpers, the mission of which is to serve the community and help those in need. A few prep items just to mention up front. We are recording and we'll post the webinar later on the website. Everyone's mics are off, and we encourage you to enter any questions you have into the chat feature, and we'll cover any questions that come up later at the end. And so sit back and relax, and thanks again for being here. Again, the title is You Mean I Can Be a Hero Too? Surprising Giving Possibilities Inspired by a Pandemic. We want you to have this information for a few reasons. First, you might not think that you can make a big impact with your personal giving, but in fact, you very likely can. Second, planned giving is actually happening more now, which is something of a surprise. And the reason being the pandemic, and because of the impact on healthcare, the people who are close to those healthcare organizations or feel strongly about the quality of healthcare, or maybe for family reasons, variety of reasons, they're thinking about their personal values, they're thinking about their personal stories and their passions. So I trust that's why you're with us too, to see maybe what's possible and knowing that you care about healthcare and UH in particular. Secondly, the 2020 charitable giving laws have been adjusted temporarily because of the CARES Act, and there may be future legislation that affects it as well. But as of today, as of May 20th, 2020, there are a couple things that have been adjusted that make some types of giving easier and more attractive right now just for this year. Chris and I first, before I introduce Chris, our speaker, he and I wanted to be sure to share with you kind of a basic definition of planned giving so you understand what that means. We refer to it sometimes as gift planning or legacy planning, and through that, you often can consider a larger gift than what you otherwise thought you could. You can think beyond your ordinary income, think beyond maybe what you would give normally annually, and consider something exciting. Some benefits from giving planned gifts. Perhaps they will be good for you because some of those vehicles also will provide you with a lifetime stream of income, and sometimes a spouse, for instance, but you, the donor, and perhaps another person who's covered by that type of gift may benefit for your lifetimes from the gift that you plan. That's pretty remarkable. And there has been some interest in that lately. I've gotten some questions about that. So that's pretty exciting possibility. Another thing is that you can use estate and tax planning to provide for your charity and your heirs. So you can take what you perceive as maybe a finite amount of money that would be in your estate and do different giving vehicles and essentially expand the money, the way that it can be given by purchasing different kinds of insurance policies, for instance, or just redistributing the gift in ways that maybe you didn't know were possible. It can really expand your influence and expand what's possible. Like it says, to help give a larger gift. And also with working with a professional, especially, you can understand and minimize the impact on your estate. So you're taking care of many entities, perhaps, that are really special to you. Typically, a planned gift is major, but it doesn't have to be. At United Helpers, a major gift would be $25,000 or more, and it can be made in your lifetime, or it can be something that comes to fruition after your passing as part of your overall estate. Many vehicles can be the vehicle that you use to make your planned gift, life insurance, real estate, and so on that you see in the list. Maybe some things that you hadn't thought of, especially retirement and stocks and things of that sort. Things that are maybe you haven't thought about lately, kinds of things. So I want to talk with you a bit about our speaker, who is here to help us to understand the good options for you personally while also having a lasting impact. And that's our expert speaker, Chris Acker Jr., who is a chartered life underwriter, that's the CLU, and a chartered financial consultant, that's the CHFC. Just a little bit about him. He grew up in Ogdensburg, and his late father was Chris Acker Sr., who was an attorney and served for decades, and is president on the board of directors for the Society of United Helpers. And as we noted, he was the first male to serve as president, which is pretty remarkable. Chris is joining us from the West Coast today and is presenting this webinar as a gift to United Helpers, honoring the great value that his father placed in United Helpers. Thank you, Chris, for doing this. To tell you a little bit more about him, Chris graduated from Williams College in 1985, and since then, his insurance career has spanned decades. He's also very active in leading and volunteering in his professional organizations out in California and with his alma mater. And Chris himself is a donor to UH, as well as a blood platelet donor in California, which is pretty impressive. Chris and his family were in Ogdensburg last summer for his father's memorial service, and we chatted at that time about his professional background and possibly doing something like this maybe someday. The family was really nice. They included me in all of their reminiscing about all their childhood memories and of summers spent on the river. So I reached out to Chris not long ago to bounce this idea off him. Could we host a remote Zoom presentation with him now? He agreed immediately without any hesitation. So we're benefiting from his professional Zoom subscription. Thank you very much, Chris, and I'm turning it over to you.
Well, thank you. I am, well, flattered and honored. I am sharing my screen so that we can all be on the same, literally on the same page. Oh, hold on 2 seconds. So, thanks, Krista. I was talking with Krista and Steve earlier before the seminar started, and was talking about how our father, my sister's on the call, and I was talking about how our dad was, as long as we can remember, at least as long as I can remember, my dad was involved in the United Helpers. I mean, he would go to these meetings religiously, and Steve confirmed that he rarely, if ever, missed a meeting, which, it just shows the importance of this group, this organization, to my dad. And, it's nice. It makes me feel good to be able to honor this memory. And in the North Country, the United Helpers is such an important organization that, when Krista called and asked, would you be interested in doing this? I mean, how could I say no, really? I mean, it just wasn't even a thought. So I've been in the insurance business since 1985, and my experience has evolved and been involved in various aspects of planned giving. Some areas more than others. Today, I want to keep it a little bit simple and kind of high level, just because between 85 and 90% of planned gifts involve simple bequests and beneficiary designations. And those are literally strokes of a pen that anyone can do and have a huge impact on an organization. And there are other way more complex ways to do certain things, but for the vast majority of folks in this country, you don't need to get fancy. You really don't. And so I want to talk about that today. And, and you can be a hero. And I think people, when they hear the term planned giving, they either tune out because they don't know what it is, or they think that it just doesn't apply, and that, quote, only rich people can do that. And so that's just simply not the case. We're going to admit someone to our webinar.
Todd is joining us. He also was having troubles with the link. I'm so sorry, Todd. Thank you for coming.
Hey, Todd, welcome. I'm Chris Acker. You just missed like the best part of the show. I'm kidding. All about me.
Thank you, Todd.
But you don't have to. It's not for the wealthy necessarily. I mean, certainly, Jackie Onassis and Bill Gates and all these other folks that you hear about, they are doing certain things. Mark Zuckerberg out here in the land of Facebook, Um, they're doing all sorts of things to benefit society. Why? Because they can. Uh, you know, but let's start with what we all can do. And this is something that Krista alluded to is, you don't have to create new complicated structures to benefit an organization. You can use what you're already doing, and that's really what I do as a professional. In my course of activities, is show people how they can actually just reposition things, and it doesn't cost them a dime out of their budget, and it can actually make a huge impact. But first, let me get to my slide here. Disclaimer and disclosure. I'm an insurance professional. I am not an attorney. I am not a CPA. I'm not providing legal advice, neither legal advice nor accounting advice. I am just talking of Krista and I, but me specifically during this part of it, we're just giving basic public information that's available publicly. If you do enough digging, pretty much anything in this world you can do yourself. It's just a matter of how much time and effort you want to spend. That's who I am. Address, phone number, contact information. Again, all of this is being recorded and will be available on the United Helpers website. So, if you miss something or you want to go back, please feel free and help yourself. All right. So most people think that plan giving is overly complex. It certainly can be. Okay. But plan giving is really a present decision to make a future gift, evidenced by a legal contract. And that last part can sound intimidating, but it's really not. A beneficiary designation is a legal contract. A piece of a bequest in a will is a legal contract. So we're not going to get fancy. Some of these planned giving vehicles do have acronyms that sound a little intimidating. CRUT, Charitable Remainder Unit Trust; CRAT, Charitable Remainder Annuity Trust; CGA, Charitable Gift Annuity; CLT, Charitable Lead Trust; PIF, Pooled Income Funds, etc. Those are things, if you are on your college or university mailing list, you probably have seen all of those. And you'll be seeing more of those from United Helpers in newsletters in the future. If you haven't already, those are common, more sophisticated planned giving tools that people use to create current income for themselves, but also leave a remainder to a charity after they're gone. They're quite common and quite useful and popular. But for today, let's keep it simple. So we're going to talk about how easy it can be. Okay, how easy can it be? Did you know that most planned giving can be done through bequests and beneficiaries? That is the quickest, easiest way. If you have an investment account, if you have an existing insurance policy, if you have group benefits that can use a beneficiary designation, you can change that. Get a form, download a form from a website typically, or an insurance company, and you can make the change and include United Helpers or any other charitable cause. Additional, more than one, you can have multiple charitable causes listed on a beneficiary form. So let's take a look at some of this stuff. So we're going to be talking primarily about insurance, wills, and IRAs today. Retirement plans are very attractive for a lot of people. In this audience, for this audience, for the United Helpers audience, I think through conversations with Krista that for retirees who have an investment account, specifically an IRA rollover, for example, they have to take required minimum distributions every single year. Not this year. With the CARES Act, this year there's an except, the pandemic, there's going to be a huge asterisk next to 2020. So basically everything changed as a result of the pandemic. However, not foregoing the pandemic, everyone has to take a required minimum distribution. This year you can skip it. But one of the things that has been common in the last few years is a qualified charitable distribution, QCD. And that means that up to $100,000 can be directed directly to a charity without having to be included in your income. So you don't have to pay tax on that. If you're a retiree and you've got the required minimum distribution, and most people either plan it out on a monthly basis or they take it at the beginning of the year. A lot of people take it at the beginning of the year. Some people take it at the end of the year if they've deferred, but through your planning, whenever you decide to take it, you can, instead of including it in your income and taking a deduction for it to a charity, you can actually have the check written from your custodian directly to the charity. And that is a better tax play, income tax play for you. And it certainly, benefits the charity because you can give more money that way and you don't have to include it in your adjusted gross income. It's as though the income never existed for you, which is always better. So then we're going to talk a little bit more about that. We're going to be talking about life insurance and wills and trusts. Okay. Some of these other methods, the pooled income fund and the pay on death. Pay on death is simply if you have a checking account and you want to appoint someone as a beneficiary on your checking account, you can do that. If you die, the money goes. It's essentially a form of ownership. And by operation of law, again, a contract goes to whoever you name. You can name a charitable contingent owner for those accounts as well. So many ways to give. So life insurance is where I focus, and over 35 and a half years, I think at this point, have seen many, many people who are older, who have a life insurance policy that they've been paying on for a long time. Some folks might not know what it is. They might not remember why they bought it. And they might not need it. And so if that's the case, then that is literally the overlooked asset. It's the forgotten asset. It's the gift in the back of your drawer. It's from my standpoint, parenthetically, as an insurance professional, it's the worst place to put an insurance policy because you want it to be front of mind. You want to remember why it's there. And that's my job to help those folks, figure out what to do with this asset. So the first bullet point, it's a great asset that can be used to magnify and create a much greater philanthropic impact for United Helpers or any other cause. People pay small premiums monthly or annually for life insurance, and when they're gone, benefits are greatly exceed what you've put into the insurance policy. That's just the beauty of that product. You can make a low cost, large impact gift generally, considering life insurance to make a meaningful gift at United Helpers. The easiest way to do this, if you do nothing else, if you have a policy, if someone has an existing policy, either on their own or through an employer group, the easiest way to benefit the charity is to change the beneficiary. Keep your primary beneficiary, if it's a spouse or, a business partner or something, depending on the reason why you bought it. But remember, keep the primary beneficiary who, as it is, name a contingent beneficiary. I can't tell you how many times I've seen policy owners who have a primary beneficiary and there is no contingent beneficiary. They leave it to the estate. It's the worst place to leave an asset is to quote your estate or the estate of the insured. because that automatically goes through probate. Probate. My sister and I can tell you, obviously, it takes 2 years at least minimum, and sometimes even longer to settle an estate. And so, why would you subject these assets, these dollars, uh, to probate when you could redirect it immediately to a cause that you care about? And again, it doesn't cost anything. You would call your insurance agent if you have one, or you would call the insurance company, give them the policy number and ask them, what to do. And they can help you with the form, and they can help you with the language. And if you have questions on that, you can call Krista and discuss, how to name the charity properly as a contingent beneficiary, or you can actually make the charity a shared primary beneficiary. And the way to do that would be to just use percentages, 90% to my spouse, 10% to United Helpers, wherever the corporate home office is. I don't know, Canton or Ogdensburg, whatever. And you would get
Ogdensburg.
that. Ogdensburg. Okay, good. So you would get that from Krista. And when you're gone, there's no probate. The charity would get the money within, a week, literally, in the form of a checkbook or a check, made out to the charity. It's so clean and easy. And so, I'm trying to be funny under the picture. Finding out that you have a life insurance policy you don't need is like giving the charity the coins you just found in the sofa cushions, except better. I mean, it's that it doesn't cost someone anything out of pocket. And the same holds true with group life insurance. If you're an employee of a relatively large company, even some small companies, but certainly larger than 100 employees, your company benefit plan typically would include, possibly a multiple of salary as a death benefit for your family. Smaller companies, it would be a certain amount of insurance, $10,000, $20,000, $50,000. You can very easily, depending on your financial planning, of course, and this all depends on your overall picture. If you don't need that death benefit, specifically for, income replacement, if you've got young kids, obviously that's different. If you've got a loan, if you've, mortgage or something, if you're at a certain point in your life where the extra group life insurance isn't going to matter to your next of kin, and the absence of that is going to not alter their lifestyle, then why wouldn't you at least consider make a charitable gift of some or all of those proceeds to United Helpers, or any, and not any, all of the other causes you like. You can name multiple beneficiaries. You can have 10 different beneficiaries. It's very easy. So here's an example of how a life insurance gift might work for a charity. And so let's say that you've got this insurance policy, you're still paying premiums on it. It is not a fully funded policy. And I'm talking about permanent life insurance. I'm talking about either an old whole life policy that pays dividends, or a newer permanent life insurance, universal life, flexible, adjustable life, indexed life insurance, variable life insurance, et cetera. Those permanent policies that have the ability to stop paying premiums if so desired, those are the policies that can be very valuable to a charity, because you can gift those policies and change the ownership. You could gift United Helpers, a $200,000 life insurance policy. They would possibly, depending, you'd have to structure this with Krista, with Steve Knight, you'd have to talk to the charity, say, will you accept this life insurance policy and keep it? And if that's the case, as part of their, overall endowment, if that's the case, then you could continue paying those premiums to the charity. You would redirect, instead of paying the insurance company, you would pay the charity, and the charity would make the payments. You, as the donor of that policy, would get an upfront tax deduction. Typically, it's the interpolated terminal reserve, which there's a formula for that. But if you have cash value, let's say you have $50,000 of cash value in this policy, that would approximate the gift that you would make up front. And then every year you pay the premium, you get a deduction for that premium when the charity owns the policy. And when you die, the charity gets the proceeds. And again, it's a sizable gift that can be made without impairing or diluting the control of, for example, of a family business or other assets that you may have if you've got this policy specifically earmarked for a charity. So in this example, you've got, sorry, hold on. In this example, if you've got a 50-year-old who committed $5,000 for 10 years, you could leverage the $50,000 total into a gift that could approximate $360,000. Those are just numbers I threw off. If you use a different policy, a second to die or survivor life policy, where you've got two people on the policy, you donate that policy, those can be even better. I mean, you can get $800,000, for example. These are just, numbers that actually, are actually real and sustainable to a family. Here are the assumptions at the bottom. 50-year-old male, preferred non-smoker, using a variable life policy. Okay, great. So that's one option, and a very common way to do it. There are all kinds of ways to structure life insurance. You could take out a new insurance policy and just name the beneficiary, just make it so that the charity is the beneficiary. You wouldn't get a tax deduction, but you would be giving a great gift. The charity, I will say that charity is going to want to be an irrevocable or irrevocable beneficiary so that you can't make changes. It's easier for them to anticipate the gift. The most attractive way to give life insurance to a charity is to give the policy to the charity, because the charity can control whether it keeps the policy on the books or if it cashes out the policy and takes cash value. The twist on that last part is now, in the last 20 or 25 years, you can actually, there's a secondary market for life insurance policies, and they're called life settlements. And so a charity can actually sell the policy without cashing it in and get a lot more money that way from the policy. So it's a vibrant market. It's an alternative investment. Hedge fund players invest in these things. They're pooled investments where you have a number of different life insurance policies commingled, and they're looking to establish a certain internal rate of return on the premiums that these funds are paying for those policies. So they hire actuaries to make these calculations, and it's just a different asset class. Gets a little bit complicated from a structuring standpoint, but the charity gets more money than just cashing in the policy for cash value, because the investment company is waiting for the policy to mature, i.e. pay out a death claim. So that's that. Let's go back to the retirement plan and the IRA for a moment. The QCD for RMD, acronym. I said I wasn't going to get into acronyms, but that's really it. The Qualified Charitable I guess I'm dyslexic today. QCD, it's supposed to be. Qualified Charitable Distribution for the RMD. Again, you can skip it this year. Beneficiary designations, very important. I'm essentially recapping what I had said earlier. Zero cost to set up. And that is, I think, from a planned giving standpoint, since we're all sort of with the organization and related fields, I mean, I would definitely do a campaign based just on beneficiary designation changes. legacy gifts and bequests because they're easy, and it does not cost a dime to do that. The only risk for something like this is that if the charity has booked a planned gift, using whatever internal formula you guys use, the risk to the charity is that the asset depletes over time. You would want an irrevocable beneficiary designation if possible. Retirement plans, if it's an ERISA plan, you're going to have the spouse sign off. Most custodians are going to want the spouse to sign off on this. But it protects you as the charity. You know that you're going to get the gift, but the risk is that the donor depletes the asset over a period of time. And that's really about the only risk that I can think of to the charity. So bequests through wills and trusts do require typically a revision in your documents. That's going to cost some money because you have to pay an attorney to do it, a notary to make it official. You would consider doing this if you are updating your plans. If it's been a while since you've taken a look at your current estate plans, your wills and your trusts, then as part of that process, you would want to include whatever designations and bequests at that time, because it's all part of the package. Attorneys are well worth the money that you spend typically, unless you get a bad one. But they save a lot of time and aggravation because typically they do it the right way, and they've got specific language that they use in their documents. And you want, if you're using a will, for example, without a trust, you want the bequest to be, the language to be very tight so that it can't be contested. Obviously, if it's a trust, it's a lot more secure and it's a lot quicker to get the gifts. But it's really important when you're reviewing your plans that you incorporate all the tools that are available to you. And a good estate planning specialist will be able to guide you and help you, especially if you are leaving a bequest, let's say to United Helpers, and you want to name or devote the dollars to a specific area of operations that or you see this in universities and colleges. I want to give it to athletic department. I want to give it to this. If you want to give the United Helpers money to establish a new group home, for example, then that's called a restricted gift. And you would have to work with Krista and Steve to figure out what, the area of restriction. And if the charity can no longer accomplish the mission that you set forth in your bequest, then you have to have contingent language to address that. And you basically have the restriction that says that if they're no longer able to accommodate this restriction, then they can use it for their general purposes as needed. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of the idea. If the group home can't be established, we'll use it for the next best thing, kind of thing. And you have to give the charity discretion to do that. If you don't, and you say, I want this group home, this money for this group home, and the charity says, okay, great, that's fine now. And 20 years from now, you die, and they're no longer doing group home things, then, they're not doing care in group homes, then they have to repurpose the gift, and they have to, if it's done through a trust, they have to go to a probate judge, et cetera, and they have to work legally to remove that restriction. And that's going to cost the charity time and money as well. So you don't want to do that. You want to make it as broad, restrictive, if possible, but a broad contingency. Okay. And that, wait, I have another slide. No, I think that's it. I think I'm at the end of my portion. I thought I was going to have a nice little transition with some music, but I think I'm pretty much going to end right here. Do we want to unmute for questions, Krista, or
Hold on, just a
yeah,
second.
sure, however you want to.
Okay.
I'll stop my screen sharing. Or you do. You got it.
I got it. So I didn't receive any questions in the chat, and no problem at all. Did anyone want to ask any particular questions right now? You can certainly unmute and share.
Yes. Hey, it's Amanda Rice.
Hi.
Amanda Acker Rice, I should say. Chris and/or Krista, do you see, or what are your thoughts, especially Chris, since you're the insurance guru here?
I see your hand. I only see your hand.
Oh, really? Can you see me now? I don't know.
No,
where
no,
my camera-
I'm looking at your kitchen floor.
You are?
I'm looking at your dishwasher.
Oh.
There you
now
are.
do
There you
see-
are. Yeah,
Oh my
absolutely.
God,
Go
I
ahead.
flipped. Okay. You can
We're only
tell
doing this. We're only doing this because we all know each other. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So, regarding using a permanent life insurance policy to make a gift, I remember many years ago when I was director of planned giving for a local, regional Philadelphia hospital, we saw insurance gifts, and I must admit, I was not really involved in these, so that's why I'm asking the question. What about using second to die policies?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that, do you see that? And would
Yes.
you recommend that?
It's,
How does
second to die. Well, second to die life insurance. If you don't know, it's typically husband and wife. You can use it
Yes.
for business partners, but 98% of the time it's husband and wife. And the death benefit is not paid until the second to die
Mm-hmm.
goes, okay, or the survivor, it's called survivor life, second survivorship life. So the mortality costs, the cost of insurance is much lower, and you can get much greater benefit to that because, again, the life expectancy is blended and it's also extended. So from a planned giving standpoint, the chair, I mean, we're all, so, the charity is going to want the money as soon as possible.
Yeah.
It's a much longer play
Yeah. Okay.
for the planned giving department. And so, I mean, it's great. You can get a lot more insurance for the premium dollar with a survivorship life policy. It's just, you have to wait, twice as long.
Right.
We United Helpers are not choosy beggars.
Yeah.
We welcome any generous gift that anyone would like to make.
Yeah.
Well, like,
We
I
never
mean,
ever say to
so-
someone that wasn't good enough or something. I mean, that would be tremendous.
Yeah. But it
You know-
probably makes it more palatable to the donor.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it
I would think-
does.
I mean, I
Make
would think you
someone
could
is taken
sell
care of.
that idea.
Oh, you
more.
could. Yeah,
Because-
no, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that as I recall, we had a specific husband and wife donor who would, I mean, like every other year, it seemed they were donating a second to die policy
Wow.
to the hospital. It was almost just part of their, I mean, that was, part of their charitable giving. I mean, it was just part of their,
That culture.
Were
Yeah.
these new, Amanda, were these new policies that people that they
no.
were taking out, or were they
You know
existing?
what? They might have been. Unfortunately, as I said, I was not really involved in executing those gifts. It wasn't, believe it or not, the head of our department had a relationship with this specific donor, and so I was never brought in, even though it was considered obviously a type of planned gift. But yeah, that's. Huh.
Well, I think it's a great idea, and especially if you have folks who bought the insurance, who bought second to die life insurance to pay estate taxes when the lifetime exemptions were low. When I
Yes.
first started, it was $600,000, right? I mean, it
Yep.
was the Reagan era, and now it's almost 25 million, or 24 million per couple. And so if you've got a bunch of these trust-owned life insurance policies that are outside the estate and no longer needed, that would be something that, that's way more common, these days. But I mean, realistically, the thing that I see the most in my day-to-day activity is group life insurance. Because anything more, if you're an employee and your employer gives you more than $50,000 of group life insurance, you have to pay tax on the premium for that, and it's based on Table I from the IRS, and it's a very high 5-year banded rate. And so when you get, I mean, I'm working with a 68-year-old banker in San Francisco, and she's an extremely high earner, and they're giving her a ton of money, a ton of benefit. And I mean, her premium that she's paying tax on is like $18,000. It's in box 13. It's in the other compensation box on the W-2. And so it's like, wait a second, you're paying tax on $18,000 of, interpolated premium or implied premium. And so why first of all opt out, but second, if you can't opt out, make charitable, in this case it's the Jewish Foundation up in San Francisco, and make them the beneficiary. Better yet, just take that money, opt out of the group plan, and buy a small policy for the charity. I mean, these are things, and that people aren't aware of, that have a huge tax impact. Krista, if you have, I'm trying to think of the large employers up there who, the universities certainly, St. Lawrence, Clarkson, they're private. They probably have very decent benefits.
State institutions have great benefits also.
Do they? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, those would be, I don't know, it seems like a target rich environment out there. I mean, for that area, I mean, it could be. I mean, you'd have to solicit and spend time on that.
Does that answer your question fully, Amanda?
Yeah, that's sure.
That's a great one. Thank you. Thank you for that. Are there any others that you guys have at this moment? I wanted to just reiterate, thank you again to Chris, and wanting to gain from this particular webinar the knowledge that it's pretty easy to designate the beneficiary of your life insurance policy, certainly through work and otherwise. Pretty easy. A lot of it can be done online now. Secondly, from your retirement savings, also pretty easy to do, and without any kind of negative feeling, especially if you're naming someone a contingency beneficiary. Very wonderful thing to do, and you don't worry then about also harming what you might leave for your heirs. And then the IRA rollover, the charitable contribution that can be done with an IRA rollover if you're 70 and a half or older, those are kind of like really big takeaways that I was hoping for you all that are participating today, because they're straightforward. They're not complex. They're pretty much an online form in many cases, or communicating with the organization that manages your IRA, and you have to distribute your QCD, as Chris was saying. So I just wanted you guys to be able to know those are three that are really well within reach and empowering, I think, to a donor to know I could do that. So I wanted everyone to know about those things. I want to thank everybody for being here today and for being a part of this, our first webinar, kind of a boutique webinar because it's specific just to United Helpers, not to the world, and a small group was invited. So I appreciate everybody being here. If you want to email a question and didn't want to ask it in the chat or didn't want to ask it verbally now, please email us at giving@unitedhelpers.org. If your question requires Chris's expertise, I will certainly forward questions on to him. Please also check our planned giving page at unitedhelpers.org/planned-gift. We'll post updates there as new information becomes available, especially related to legislation that's just newly being passed surrounding the COVID pandemic. Things are changing and there are different packages they talk about, and as things change, we'll post updates there as well. And our intention again is to post the webinar recording on our website, a link to our recording on the website. So I would have it probably posted on the giving page and the planned giving page in particular. Any other questions before we are ready to wrap up? I want to say thank you to Chris, a hearty, hearty thank you for joining us all the way from California to lend your expertise in support of United Helpers. And Amanda Rice, Chris's sister, it was very kind of you to be here too. I'm excited that you were able to be here. And
Yeah.
I thank everyone so very much for being a part of this. Thank you,
Well,
everybody.
Yeah,
You're doing
thanks.
wonderful things at
Thanks so
United
much.
Helpers. So good for you. Thanks so
Grateful
much.
to-
I was pleased to be.
Enjoyed having you here. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
here,
you.
here. Okay, yeah,
Bye.
thanks, Steve. Nice to
Thank
meet
you,
you
everyone.
as well.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much.
Yep, you're
Bye.
welcome. And feel free to shoot me an email or phone
All
call
right.
or whatever.
Bye-bye. Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.
Take care,
Bye,
everybody.
Chris.
Bye. Yeah. Hey, see you,
Bye,
meeting. Bye.
Steve.
Yeah.
See ya.